Cole Davis exhaled slowly as he stepped into the Proxima Grand Hall of the Galactic Concordat, his polished shoes making a soft click against the smooth composite flooring. Overhead, gilded arches and crystalline panels reflected the light of a dozen different star lamps, each calibrated for a distinct species' visual spectrum. The air hummed with overlapping conversations in countless languages, from the musical chimes of the Zenthari to the guttural roars of the Maldrax. Hovering translator drones darted between clusters of diplomats, frantically converting utterances into comprehensible speech. Despite all this vibrant noise, Cole felt a calm settle over him. He brushed his thumb across a small silver pin fastened to the lapel of his tailored jacket. The pin was shaped like a five-pointed star, with a tiny blue stone at its center. Most who bothered to look at it simply thought it a diplomatic ornament, or perhaps an Earth custom. No one here realized what it meant to him. Not yet. Humans, according to the official Concordat archives, were classified as an emergent species of moderate concern, an unremarkable entry on page 738, Section D. Cole's presence in the Concordat's assembly was, to many, little more than a polite gesture extended to a relatively new addition to the galactic community. Yet the humans, in their own quiet way, had managed to secure an invitation, and it was Cole's duty to show that their presence was not a trivial courtesy. He passed dozens of delegates from across the galaxy, Cordaxians glowing with pastel bioluminescence as they communicated in a chorus of flickering patterns, Melnarians with translucent, jelly-like skin that pulsed in time with their speech, and the imposing Ectori, tall and spindly, wearing robes that trailed elegantly behind them. Each species carried its own set of traditions, prejudices, and ambitions. And while many approached interstellar relations with caution or curiosity, only one marched with open swagger and arrogance: the Vraxians. Cole caught sight of them near the central dais. A knot of 7 Vraxian officers spoke in low, resonant tones, the floor trembling faintly beneath their combined weight. At their center stood the tallest being Cole had ever seen, Commander Ravaner of the Vraxian Empire, known across multiple star systems as a living legend. He was nearly 9 feet of crimson-scaled muscle, clad in segmented armor etched with ornate markings. Upon closer inspection, Cole noticed that these markings were actually kill notches, hundreds of them, each commemorating a victory. Ravaner's 4 arms were folded across his broad chest, and his gaze moved with cold assessment over the hall, as though he were already deciding which species would submit and which might require an actual fight. Most delegates gave the Vraxians a wide berth. The species had built an empire on relentless conquest, tempered only by a grudging acceptance of the Concordat's overarching peace mandates. Everyone in the hall knew they were here primarily to expand their influence rather than genuinely cooperate. Rumors hinted at suspicious raids in the Cygnus Arm, with the Vraxian Empire pointing fingers at so-called pirates who targeted trade routes. A few enterprising investigators had found hints that these so-called pirates might be little more than well-placed mercenaries who served Vraxian interests, but no one had dared to speak such accusations in open assembly. At least, not until today. Cole approached a small group of Melnarians who were engaged in polite conversation about resource sharing. He nodded a greeting, offered a succinct comment on Earth's perspective regarding trade policies, and then bowed out. Every step he took advanced him closer to the Vraxian contingent, though he navigated the crowd slowly enough to avoid appearing confrontational. He felt the weight of many eyes on him. Word traveled fast in diplomatic circles, and the rumored human ambassador rarely made a personal approach to the Vraxians unannounced. He suppressed a faint smile, recalling the words of a dear friend, someone who believed wholeheartedly that courtesy combined with courage was the surest path to change. The memory of that friend both strengthened him and stung him at the same time. Finally, Cole stepped into Ravaner's field of view. The Vraxian commander's dark eyes snapped toward him, and the murmur of conversation in that part of the hall died down. "Commander Ravaner," Cole said, inclining his head just enough to be polite. "I hope you find the accommodations here satisfactory." Ravaner snorted, a harsh sound that made the smaller delegates flinch. Ah, yes, a human. Cole Davis, is it not? He made a show of looking Cole up and down. I hear your kind discovered faster-than-light travel a mere moment ago in galactic terms. An impressive leap for a species that only recently grasped the concept of atomic energy. A few centuries might feel short to someone of your perspective, Cole agreed, still calm. We do what we can with the time we have. Ravaner's lips curled back, revealing jagged teeth. I've been told you've come to question the Vraxian Empire's motives, or so the gossip says. I find that almost endearing, as if you believe your presence will have an impact on decisions that far greater powers make. Cole offered a faint smile in response. The Concordat sees value in every voice, Commander. And perhaps sometimes the smaller voices carry unexpected weight. Ravaner barked a laughter-like sound. His entourage joined in, armor clattering. You have courage, I'll give you that. Come then, show me how Earth's voice contends with the unstoppable tide of necessity. My empire does not posture idly. If we push forward to secure the Cygnus arm, it is because real threats lurk among the shipping lanes. This galaxy is a dangerous place for the unwary. The Cygnus arm is indeed dangerous, Cole conceded, but not solely because of any outside threat. My people have studied the pattern of attacks. They happen to coincide with shipping routes that refuse certain protection deals from the Vraxian military. Meanwhile, those who do sign such contracts remain curiously unscathed. Silence expanded around them, as though the entire hall held its breath. It was a direct challenge, a data-backed accusation. Ravaner's four arms shifted as though he pondered whether to seize Cole on the spot. Instead, he exhaled in a low hiss. You dare accuse me of orchestrating piracy to extort compliance from weaker species. I dare present evidence to the Concordat, Commander, Cole replied, and request that we examine the data openly so that everyone might see precisely what is going on. One of Ravaner's subordinates, a scarred female Vraxian with a triple crest on her helmet, snarled, We have intelligence to the contrary. The pirates specifically avoid Vraxian-protected sectors because they know we would crush them on sight. Cole made a small gesture that might have been a shrug. We can clarify the truth easily with further investigation. If your data shows a different pattern, I encourage you to share it. The Concordat has established teams for precisely such tasks. Ravaner's rage was almost palpable. He didn't raise his voice, but it thrummed with menace. Humans and their meddling. You believe you can waltz onto the galactic stage and lecture those who carved civilizations from the void centuries before your kind knew the shape of your own solar system. Cole stood firm, meeting Ravaner's gaze without flinching. We're new here, I grant you that, but novelty doesn't invalidate our position. Ravaner's secondary heart rate, a trait often monitored by cunning diplomats, pounded so intensely that several translator drones whirred away, as though expecting a physical confrontation. Yet any direct violence in the hall would violate Concordat protocols. The Vraxians despised the constraint, but generally abided by it, given the political cost of open aggression. A handful of delegates from other species drifted closer, pretending to be absorbed in their own conversations while actually listening intently. This was bigger than a personal spat. The humans were taking a bold step forward, potentially shifting the balance of power. Cole could almost sense the swirling alliances forming in real time. At length, Ravaner let out a rumbling sound and turned away. We shall see what the council says tomorrow. But mark my words, human, your data is worthless if the Empire calls it a lie. Who will they believe? Some upstart representative, or a civilization whose armies have proven their worth time and again? Cole dipped his head. Tomorrow, then. I look forward to the discussion. With that, he stepped back, allowing the tension to dissipate. Whispers followed him as he exited the main floor and moved toward one of the side galleries. A few friendly delegates, like the shimmering Zenthari ambassador, offered half-concealed compliments on his bravery. Others simply gawked, as though expecting him to vanish under the weight of Vraxian ire. Cole exhaled once he was out of Ravaner's immediate orbit. He raised one hand to his chest and felt the silver star pin. It grounded him, His friend would have told him not to falter now. Indeed, she believed fiercely in Earth's capacity to stand up for itself and for others. She had died living out that belief, saving innocents, her body found in the wreckage of crisis on a remote colony world. That memory was an unhealed wound, but it gave him strength when he needed it most. The next morning, the council gathered in one of the largest chambers of the Proxima complex. Rows of seating terraces rose in concentric arcs around a central platform. Hovering orbs projected three-dimensional star maps whenever a delegation requested data. The architecture itself was mind-boggling, shaped by an amalgam of technologies from a dozen species, each chosen for aesthetic or practical reasons. The ceiling shimmered as if made of liquid glass, revealing the swirling cosmos beyond. Cole stood with his translator drone humming at shoulder height. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd chosen a conservative dark suit, something that wouldn't distract from the evidence he intended to present. All around him, delegates assembled, chatting among themselves in a swirl of languages. A hush fell as the Concordat's lead moderator, a geometric hologram that pulsed with softly shifting lights, took center stage. It announced the day's agenda, reconfirmed the protocols for discussion, and then invited the first matter of urgent business: security in the Cygnus arm. That was the signal for Commander Ravaner to take the floor. The enormous Vraxian stepped onto the circular platform. A hush fell over the chamber, and the acoustic systems automatically adjusted to carry his resonant voice. "Esteemed delegates," he began, "the Vraxian Empire has observed a disturbing escalation in pirate raids against civilian freighters. Our intelligence networks, which are undoubtedly among the most advanced in the galaxy, indicate that these raiders strike without warning and vanish into uncharted regions. Therefore, we propose an immediate expansion of Vraxian-led patrols. We will establish permanent garrisons along key routes, ensuring the safety of all who traverse these sectors." Cole noticed several delegates exchanging uneasy glances. A permanent Vraxian presence in resource-rich systems was precisely what many smaller species had feared. It was, in effect, an occupation under the guise of security. The moderator's voice chimed. "We recognize the delegate from Earth." Cole stepped forward. The platform's sensors detected his movement and focused the chamber's amplifiers on him. "Honorable Commander Ravaner, and respected members of the Concordat, I echo your concern for the safety of trade routes in the Cygnus arm. However, Earth has compiled data from multiple independent sources: merchant guilds, local outposts, and even some of the Vraxian-guarded stations themselves. Our analysis suggests a curious trend." He gestured, and a star map flickered into view above the center. Red dots indicated reported pirate attacks, while blue lines showed known shipping lanes. Notice how every assault cluster sits adjacent to routes that do not have a Vraxian security contract. Meanwhile, shipping lines that have agreed to pay for Vraxian protection remain untouched. The correlation is highly suggestive. A ripple of shocked murmurs swelled across the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward, riveted by the map. Others shot sharp looks toward the Vraxian delegation. Ravaner's jaw clenched as he watched the flickering data. "How dare you accuse us?" he began, but Cole lifted a hand, maintaining a polite tone. "I'm not here to accuse, Commander, only to present the data. If your intelligence indicates otherwise, I invite you to share it so we can reconcile the differences. The Concordat can then form an independent investigative team to verify the truth. We all want safe trade, do we not?" Trapped in a diplomatic bind, Ravaner could not openly refuse a neutral investigation without appearing suspicious. Yet if he accepted, his secret arrangement, should it exist, risked exposure. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. The Vraxian Empire will consider cooperating with any properly formed council, Ravaner finally ground out. But we do not appreciate slander. Our honor is not to be trifled with. The moderator, keenly aware of the friction, proposed a short recess. Delegates began to file out into the corridors, some for refreshments, others to hold private discussions. As Cole stepped away from the central platform, he allowed himself a small, cautious smile. This was precisely the conversation Earth needed to force. Even if it earned them the Vraxians' enmity, it might save countless lives from unscrupulous extortion. He'd barely made it to the corridor before a voice rumbled behind him. Human. He turned to see Ravaner towering over him, flanked by two imposing Vraxian officers. You have some nerve, challenging my empire in front of the entire council. Cole adjusted his posture, refusing to show intimidation. I only presented facts. If the facts challenge your empire, perhaps you should question those responsible for creating them. One of the officers snarled, but Ravaner silenced her with a gesture. Then he took a step closer, overshadowing Cole. You speak of honor, but you do not comprehend what it means in Vraxian culture. We carve our place through conquest and power, not subtle manipulations. You hide behind the Concordat's rules and your illusions of data. Where I come from, we settle such disputes by blade and blood, not words. I'm aware of Vraxian traditions, Cole replied coolly. But we stand under Concordat jurisdiction, where violence is not the answer, unless you intend to break those laws. Ravaner narrowed his eyes. I do not break laws without purpose, human. But do not presume your safety is guaranteed. He glanced at Cole's silver star pin with a sneer. What is that trinket you keep touching? A symbol of Earth's childish desire for attention. Cole's hand instinctively moved to the pin, then dropped away. It's a reminder of someone who believed in defending those who can't defend themselves. The Vraxian let out a bark of laughter. Defending the weak? Yes, I've heard your kind idolizes such pointless sacrifice. On my world, we glorify the strong. We do not celebrate those who perish in futile attempts to shield the lesser. An icy tremor went through Cole. He'd heard a few delegates approach behind him, but no one interrupted. They probably wanted to see how far this exchange would go. Some would say, he said quietly, that saving lives is never futile. Ravaner gave a vicious grin. Such softness will cost you dearly. The strong shape history, and the weak either serve or perish. If your deceased friend died protecting feeble creatures, then they died a meaningless death. He shrugged with all four of his arms. No wonder your species is so small in the cosmic ledger. A hush took hold of the corridor. Even the translator drones whirred uncertainly, as though reluctant to repeat the insult. Cole felt his blood go cold. He'd endured scorn and mockery, but hearing Ravaner sneer at the memory of the friend who had sacrificed her life, calling her death meaningless, his chest tightened with anger that threatened to boil over. Yet Cole did not rage. He drew a slow breath, forcibly mastering himself. The silver pin glinted beneath the corridor's lighting. You will regret saying that, Commander, he said softly. Not because I'll punish you, but because you'll learn how wrong you are. Before Ravaner could muster a retort, Cole stepped aside and walked past him, leaving the watchers in tense silence. He clenched his fists just enough that his nails pressed into his palms, an anchor to keep himself from shouting or worse. No matter how stung he felt, he could not afford to lose composure in this environment. That evening, in a smaller atrium reminiscent of an alien garden, Cole sat alone on a bench carved from polished black stone. Phosphorescent vines climbed artificial trellises, and the overhead dome was set to cycle through gentle illusions of alien skies. Soft chimes signaled the passing of hours. This space was designed to let delegates find a moment of peace, but Cole's mind was anything but peaceful. He recalled the day his friend, Captain Sarah Lindholm, had died. Their colony on the fringes had been threatened by a lethal atmospheric breach. Instead of evacuating for her own safety, she had stayed behind to guide the last group of children to rescue ships, braving toxic fumes. She'd saved over 1,000 lives that day, and perished when part of the colony collapsed. The star-shaped pin Cole wore had been her small, good luck charm, which she'd once lent him during officer training back on Earth. For Ravaner to belittle that sacrifice, Cole shut his eyes jaw tight. His friend had believed that protecting the vulnerable was the highest calling, not a sign of weakness. He would not let the memory of that day be sullied by someone like Ravaner. A subtle presence drew Cole from his thoughts. He opened his eyes to see Ambassador Keelys of the Zenthary. a crystalline figure refracting the atrium's soft lighting with gentle prismatic glimmers. Keelys inclined their faceted head in greeting. "Ambassador Davis, I hope I do not disturb your reflections." Cole gave a faint smile. "Not at all, Ambassador. I was only remembering someone important." Keely's crystalline facets shifted, indicating empathy. "Word of your exchange with Commander Ravaner has already spread. Many are unsettled. The Vraxians pride themselves on leaving no challenge unanswered. Insulting a Vraxian, or being insulted by one in such a personal way, can escalate." "I didn't insult him, though," Cole replied. "I only told him he might regret his words in time. In the minds of the Vraxian warrior caste, that is as good as a challenge," Keely said gently. "They do not interpret your calmness as anything but arrogance. You must understand, in their society, the notion of honor combat is as sacred as any legal proceeding is to the Concordat. If you humiliate Ravaner further, you risk pushing him into a corner." Cole nodded slowly. "I appreciate the warning, but I can't let him or his empire bully smaller species. I won't let them speak ill of those who sacrificed everything for others." Keely's refractive surface glowed in what Cole had learned to read as sympathy. "Just be cautious. I have come to admire how humans shape their resilience through adversity. I would not like to see your story end on a tragic note." After Keely's left, Cole lingered, watching a swirl of illusions overhead, stars forming constellations not known to Earth's skies. Perhaps that was a small metaphor for humanity's place in this vast cosmos, a single pinpoint of light among countless stars, forging its shape in the darkness. The following day's session opened with renewed vigor. Delegates were on edge, anticipating more friction between the Vraxian Empire and the human representative. Even the Concordat's lead moderator seemed to cycle through placating color patterns in its holographic form, as though trying to soothe the tension preemptively. True to form, Ravaner wasted no time. Rising to his full height, he demanded the floor. "We have considered the new data from Earth," he said, practically spitting the word. "The Vraxian Empire rejects the notion that our security contracts are linked to the pirates. We see instead a chance to expand our protective reach for the benefit of the galaxy. Yet we are met with ungrateful skepticism." Several delegates shifted uneasily, but no one spoke at first. Ravaner continued, voice rising. "I say let us dispense with half measures. If the Concordat wants peace, then let us do what must be done. Authorize Vraxian fleets to maintain order in the Cygnus Arm, or else shoulder the responsibility for every freighter lost." Cole watched him, waiting for a pause. Then he signaled the moderator. "Commander Ravaner, once again, we do not question your stated motive, only your methods. Earth has proposed a joint security force with oversight from multiple species so that we all share the burden. This would ensure transparency." He kept his voice measured, refusing to be drawn into loud confrontation. "Transparency is for the weak," Ravaner growled. "Vraxians act decisively. Your endless committees lead nowhere. While you chatter, pirates burn whole freighters and murder civilians." Cole activated his translator drone so that all would hear him clearly. "I sympathize with your sense of urgency, Commander. But I must remind the Council that our data strongly implicates certain Vraxian interests behind the pirates. Until that is disproven, handing control of the region entirely to Vraxian forces would be ill-advised." A wave of uneasy murmurs rippled through the seats. Ravaner's crest flared with indignation. He slammed a massive fist on the rail before him, making the entire row vibrate. "You smear our honor again with these insinuations. You humans think you have the moral high ground, yet you are newcomers who barely know this galaxy. Perhaps it's time we settle this the way my ancestors would have done it." Enough talk. Several delegates inhaled sharply. Ravaner was teetering on the edge of violating Concordat norms right here in the council chamber. One of his officers tried to tug him back, but the commander shrugged the hand away. Cole stood his ground. "Commander, you risk overshadowing the real issue. We're only here to protect." "Protect?" Ravaner snarled. "You can't even protect your own from atmospheric collapse, can you?" I heard rumors about how you revere the memory of some fool who died herding useless civilians to safety. Cole's vision tunneled. He felt every muscle in his body tense. A hush fell over the chamber, so profound that even the whir of translator drones seemed to fade. Ravaner smirked, pressing the advantage. Yes, I learned her name. Captain Lindholm, wasn't it? She died like a servant, pulling worthless runts out of danger, accomplishing nothing in the grand scale of the cosmos. And you wear her little star as if it's a war medal. How quaint. A primal roar of fury threatened to tear out of Cole's throat. He forced it down with sheer will. The entire council was watching. Finally, he spoke, voice steady but ice-cold. Commander Ravaner, you mocked my friend's memory one time too many. So let's settle this in the way your culture understands. I invoke Article 17 of the Concordat Charter, the right of cultural resolution. Gasps broke out across the chamber. Article 17 was an obscure clause that allowed a personal dispute, when it reached a point of grave offense, to be resolved by the traditions of one or both involved parties, bypassing standard Concordat procedures. It was almost never used because the risk of diplomatic fallout was immense. The moderator's hologram pulsed anxiously. Ambassador Davis, are you certain? Article 17 authorizes violent resolution outside the usual legal frameworks. Cole never broke eye contact with Ravaner. I am certain. Commander Ravaner has insulted the most sacred memory I hold. The Vraxian Empire acknowledges that an insult to a warrior or their kin can be redeemed only through an honor duel. I request that we conduct this duel according to Vraxian tradition. For a moment, Ravaner was so stunned he simply stared. Then a slow grin spread across his scarred face. You can hardly be serious. You, a weak human, challenging me. To an honor duel? Do you realize the conditions? Cole's voice was low. I've studied them. I know an honor duel can end in death, or in concession, but your law allows the challenge party to propose a non-lethal victory condition, does it not? Ravaner's grin twisted. He had no choice. To refuse a direct challenge of honor would be catastrophic to his reputation. But to accept risked condemnation if he killed a relatively defenseless ambassador. Still, his pride would not allow him to back down. Fine, he spat. First blood or submission. No lethal outcome required. But that will not save you if you prove unworthy. Cole inclined his head. Agreed. He turned to the moderator. I asked the Concordat to witness. Panic rippled through the chamber. The Concordat usually avoided direct violence among delegates. Yet Article 17 was embedded in the charter at the insistence of older warrior races like the Vraxians, precisely for situations like this. The moderator had no choice but to schedule the duel. Tomorrow, in a neutral arena, Cole Davis would face Commander Ravaner in single combat. As delegates filed out, a wave of chatter exploded. Many thought it would be a slaughter. Some, curious about humans, wondered if there might be more to Cole than met the eye. Yet the universal consensus was that Ravaner had never lost a fight in 3 centuries. The odds seemed hopeless. Cole retreated to a private suite that evening, ignoring the swirl of speculation. He needed to prepare. The suite was small by Concordat standards, but comfortable, containing a bunk, a modest workspace, and a window with a view of swirling cosmic dust. He paced the floor, adrenaline thrumming through him, half dreading what lay ahead. He removed his jacket and placed the silver star pin on a small table. Carefully, reverently, he touched the stone at its center. Sarah, he murmured, addressing the memory of his friend. I am sorry. I let him speak about you that way. But tomorrow, I'll show him what your sacrifice really meant. A soft beep came from the door. Cole blinked, collecting himself. Enter. The door slid open to reveal another earthling, a wiry man named Bryce. He served as Cole's assistant and logistician. Ambassador, everyone's going wild out there. They think you're marching to your death. Cole gave a tired smile. They might not be wrong, but I can't let him trample her memory. Bryce nodded slowly. You have no illusions about who you're up against, do you? I have a very clear idea, Cole said. Commander Ravaner is massive, genetically engineered, and trained in lethal combat. But he has a critical weakness. He's adapted for power, not endurance. If I can drag out the fight, make him expend energy, I might stand a chance. Bryce hesitated, then stepped forward. Ambassador, you do have formal close-quarters training from your time in the Defense Corps, but this is, well, you've never faced a Vraxian in single combat. Cole exhaled. I know, but Sarah taught me how to handle bigger opponents by using their momentum against them. Precision, technique, outlasting them. She believed we could defend ourselves without matching brute force. I'll rely on that. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Bryce nodded. I'll help you with any final logistical details. The neutral arena is open for inspection. We can confirm the environment settings, gravity ratio, and so forth. The less advantage he has, the better. Cole placed the star pin on his jacket. Thank you, Bryce. Let's get it done. The neutral arena was a grand circular space, dome-roofed, typically reserved for ceremonial exhibitions. The Concordat had repurposed it for the upcoming duel, setting aside an observation area for delegates. Word had spread so fast that some spectators had arrived hours early, eager to witness the unprecedented spectacle of a human challenging the mightiest Vraxian alive. A hush fell as Commander Ravaner stepped into the arena first. He wore ceremonial Vraxian armor polish to a deep crimson shine, its shoulders and chest scrawled with intricate kill notches. In his upper right hand, he carried a blade nearly as tall as Cole. In his other hands, he flexed thick claws, eager for the kill. He turned slowly, letting the assembled watchers admire his imposing form. Then Cole entered. Instead of formal diplomatic attire, he wore a simple black bodysuit designed for flexible motion. No grand insignias, no heavy armaments. The only ornament remained that silver star pin, attached near his collarbone as if it alone were shield enough. The crowd reacted with startled whispers. He appeared almost unarmed. An official from the Concordat addressed them both in a resonant voice. We gather under the authority of Article 17. The dispute between Commander Ravaner of the Vraxian Empire and Ambassador Cole Davis of Earth shall be resolved through Vraxian honor duel. Victory is decided by first blood or submission. Should either party concede, the duel ends. Ravaner drew himself up. So be it. Cole bowed ever so slightly, acknowledging the officiant. He let his gaze rest on Ravaner, who stood nearly 3 feet taller, all muscle and aggression. Even so, the human's eyes were steady. A clear gong rang through the arena, signaling the start. Ravaner lunged. His speed defied expectation, given his massive frame. He crossed half the distance between them in a single bound, swinging that enormous blade in a downward arc. But Cole was already rolling aside, the blade slamming into the arena floor with a shower of sparks. Undeterred, Ravaner spun, blade whooshing horizontally. Again, Cole dropped under it, feeling the displaced air ruffle his hair. He sprang back to create distance. Applause and gasps rippled through the stands. Many had assumed the first strike would finish the human instantly. Ravaner snarled, pivoting and charging again. This time, he used 2 arms on the blade and 2 arms free. One of the free arms lashed out, claws scraping the fabric of Cole's bodysuit just as Cole twisted away. A near miss. Then came a savage backswing from a blade. Cole backpedaled, barely keeping ahead. For nearly a minute, the pattern repeated. Ravaner attacked in a relentless flurry, each strike powerful enough to bisect a lesser foe. Cole evaded, always a half step beyond the fatal blow. Still, the difference in physical might was clear. Every time the wind from Ravaner's blade grazed Cole, he felt a jolt of fear. One mistake, one slip, and he'd be cut down. Yet there was a method in Cole's movements. He never attempted an early counterattack. He forced Ravaner to keep moving, keep swinging. He recalled Sarah's voice in his head. Bide your time. Watch for the moment when the giant grows tired. The adrenaline in Cole's veins sharpened his reflexes. He darted sideways, lured Ravaner into another wide slash, then danced back. From the stands, many watchers were riveted, scarcely believing the human was still alive. Ravaner's frustration grew palpable. He roared and redoubled his strikes, each resounding against the arena floor or slicing empty air. Half the crowd believed Cole's luck would run out at any second. Others began to suspect that something else was at play. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was only a few minutes, Ravanner's blows slowed. His breathing grew heavier, and the vents on his armor hissed as his secondary lungs kicked in. The Vraxian body was engineered for short, explosive bursts of power. A prolonged chase gradually taxed them. Cole recognized the sign. He sprang inward, feinting left. Ravanner tried to whirl the blade up to meet him, but Cole ducked underneath the strike zone. Then Cole lashed out with a precise palm strike, hitting a nerve cluster on Ravanner's torso. The Vraxian staggered, momentarily losing sensation in two of his arms. Gasps erupted. No one had expected the human to land a single meaningful hit. Ravanner bellowed in fury, swinging with his remaining arms. Cole pivoted behind him, hooking a leg around Ravanner's massive ankle. With a sharp yank, he sent the towering figure off balance. Ravanner stumbled, nearly toppling. Seizing the chance, Cole wove around Ravanner's flank and struck another nerve cluster near the base of the neck plating. The huge warrior howled in pain, his arms spasming. The next moment, Cole kicked the hilt of Ravanner's blade, dislodging it from the Vraxian's grip. Before Ravanner could recover, Cole caught the blade and turned it, pressing its tip gently but firmly to Ravanner's throat. Silence, absolute and total. Ravanner, the undefeated legend, stood panting, locked in place by the threat of his own sword. Trickles of dark blood beaded at his mouth from where he'd bitten his tongue. Cole, breathing hard, maintained the hold. One final movement from Ravanner, and Cole could end it if he chose. For a beat, all that could be heard was the rasp of heavy breathing. Finally, Cole spoke, voice resonating through the hush. "Yield, Commander. We fight under your traditions. I've bested you fairly. Or must I draw first blood to prove the point?" Ravanner trembled with rage and disbelief. But he knew he was beaten. One errant motion, and he'd lose far more than his pride. "I yield." He spat, bitter words that had never before passed his lips. The stands exploded into an uproar of shock, excitement, and, in some corners, triumph. Delegates who had grown weary of Vraxian intimidation cheered wholeheartedly. Others simply stared in stunned silence. No one had ever imagined seeing Ravanner forced to surrender by a so-called weak human. Cole stepped back, lowering the blade. His own arms shook from the residual adrenaline. He tossed the sword aside, letting it clang on the ground. Several medics, both Vraxian and neutral, rushed in. But Ravanner stood on his own, glaring at Cole with equal parts hatred and, beneath that, reluctant awe. Quietly, Cole added, "The person you insulted, she sacrificed her life to save hundreds of innocents. That is a strength you can't quantify in kill notches. If you still think it meaningless, Commander, then perhaps you've learned nothing at all." Ravanner bared his teeth, but there was no quick retort. The entire galaxy, or at least a large part of it, was watching. His legend would never be the same. The council reconvened later that afternoon in a swirl of intense conversation. Rumors abounded. Some speculated that Vraxian power would wane after this humiliation. Others wondered if they might lash out in revenge. Yet the Concordat was in a stronger position to demand accountability, especially now that Ravanner's invincibility had been challenged. Cole sat at his usual seat, nursing a deep ache in his shoulders. Though he'd won, his body felt the strain. The silver star pin gleamed on his collar, reflecting overhead lights. He thought about how proud Sarah would have been, not because he'd defeated someone, but because he'd done it without resorting to merciless aggression. He had proven that cunning, endurance, and a willingness to protect the vulnerable could stand against brute force. A hush fell when Ravanner himself entered the chamber. The tall Vraxian moved stiffly, residual pain visible in his expression. His retinue kept a careful distance, uncertain how to behave after their commander's defeat. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ravanner stepped onto the central dais, inhaled, and addressed the council. "The Vraxian Empire acknowledges the outcome of the honor duel. We hold that no further personal grievance remains between me and Ambassador Davis." His words echoed grudgingly. In the spirit of continued cooperation, the Empire will agree to more transparent collaboration in the Cygnus Arm. A shockwave of surprise moved through the delegates. While Ravanner's tone was bitter, the content was unmistakable, a concession. The Concordat's lead moderator manifested next to him, flickering lights indicating cautious approval. "We note the Vraxian Empire's statement. These negotiations shall continue, with oversight to ensure a balanced approach." Ravanner turned to face Cole, who stood as well. For an endless moment, the two locked gazes, neither speaking. Cole finally offered a slight bow. Ravanner gave no outward sign of reciprocation, yet he did not sneer, either. It was the closest thing to acceptance Cole would get, and perhaps the only gesture of respect the Vraxian knew how to give under the circumstances. When the official business concluded, the crowd dispersed into smaller knots of conversation. Several ambassadors, Zinthari, courtesian, even a few Melnarians, approached Cole to offer subdued congratulations. They recognized that while the duel had been legally sanctioned, it still stood as an extraordinary feat to outfight a monstrous champion. Keelys, the Zinthari ambassador, greeted Cole with luminous facets. "Your demonstration was unexpected. I am relieved you survived." Cole gave a tired laugh. "So am I." He paused, glancing across the hall to where Ravanner spoke in low tones with a pair of Arcturon delegates. "He'll never forgive me for denting his pride like that." Keelys' crystals pulsed softly. "Perhaps not, but there are many reasons to push for peace. Pride is seldom the greatest of them." Cole nodded, letting the moment sink in. He glanced at the silver star pin. Sarah believed that if you fight for the right reasons, you can shift the balance. Maybe we're not as small as the galaxy thinks. Later, after the day's formalities and private negotiations had concluded, Cole found himself alone in a quiet corridor. Ambient lights glowed softly along the walls, and the hush felt like a balm after the tumultuous events. He paused before a broad window that overlooked the swirling cosmic vistas. Ships of every shape and size drifted in orbit, representing civilizations far older and some far younger than Earth. He unclasped the silver star pin from his collar and held it up to the window's light. Tiny reflections danced across the polished metal. His thoughts drifted to memories of Sarah's laughter, her unwavering confidence that humans could bring something positive to the galactic stage, something beyond just more warriors or more exploitation. "You told me once that we should never be afraid to stand for what's right," he whispered to the silent corridor. "I hope you're proud, wherever you are." In a reflection on the window, he glimpsed movement behind him. He turned to find Ravanner standing there, arms folded. The commander was not wearing his full ceremonial armor, only a simpler set of heavy-duty fatigues. Even so, he looked colossal. Cole inhaled. "Commander," he said quietly, "congratulations on the Council's acceptance of a shared security plan. It'll save lives." Ravanner's mouth twisted. "You say that as if I had no choice. But perhaps I see sense in it after all. This is no admission of wrongdoing, mind you." "I never expected that," Cole replied. He carefully pinned the star back on his jacket. "I appreciate the willingness to compromise." Ravanner's eyes dropped to the pin. "That belongs to the friend you lost?" Cole nodded. "Yes. She was extraordinary. The best among us." Ravanner exhaled. "I spoke words that belittled her. In my culture, I believed any act that did not seize victory was worthless. Yet you overcame me not through brute force, but by outlasting. Perhaps we Vraxians have grown blind to other forms of strength." Cole felt a flicker of surprise. Was Ravanner apologizing? It was difficult to tell, but at least the hostility in his gaze was tempered. "People can learn," Cole said softly. "I learned from her example. You can learn from ours." Ravanner gave a low, rumbling sound. "One day, we may cross blades again. But next time, it might not be as enemies." He turned away, footsteps echoing. "Farewell, cold Davis of Earth." Watching him go, Cole felt a wave of relief. The immediate crisis had passed, and humanity had left a distinct mark. Perhaps in time, the Vraxian Empire would integrate more fully into the Concordat's cooperative framework. Or perhaps they would remain proud and warlike, only less dismissive of those they once deemed insignificant. With a tired sigh, Cole left the corridor. Tomorrow, fresh challenges would arise. Other delegates would want Earth's perspective, possibly on issues beyond Cygnus Arm. He had more data to compile, more discussions to hold. But for tonight, he could rest knowing he had defended the memory of someone dear and shown the galaxy what it meant to stand up for sacrifice rather than belittle it. Days later, the official record of the Proxima Summit concluded with a final statement. The Vraxian Empire and the Concordat would form a joint investigative team to identify the source of piracy in the Cygnus Arm. Vraxian patrols would be balanced by Melnarian, Cortesian, and human oversight, ensuring fairness. Numerous smaller civilizations expressed relief at being spared the threat of unilateral Vraxian occupation. Word spread across the galaxy of how Commander Ravaner, once undefeated, had been defeated by a human. Entire networks buzzed with speculation. Some insisted it was a fluke. Others claimed cunning had beaten raw strength. Vraxian loyalists tried to minimize the incident. Nevertheless, the story took on a life of its own, becoming a topic of endless fascination. In the hush of a starship heading back toward Earth, Cole Davis sat strapped into a comfortable seat in the passenger cabin. He listened to the hum of the engines, letting it lull him into a reflective mood. On a small table beside him lay a digital pad containing messages from Earth's leadership. They ranged from amazement to concern, but overall, they carried a note of pride. Humanity had proven itself capable of forging a place in the galactic community, not through conquest, but through resolve and moral conviction. Cole smiled, gazing at the silver pin in his palm. "We're getting there, Sarah," he murmured. "One step at a time." The ship's navigational array indicated that they would soon jump to a faster-than-light corridor. Beyond that corridor lay the Sol System, a small blue planet with an uncertain but hopeful future in this vast cosmic tapestry. Far away, in the center of the Vraxian Empire, rumors were swirling through the ranks. Some were outraged that Ravaner had not demanded a rematch. Others believed the commander's surrender had been manipulated by the cunning Earth ambassador. A subset of forward-thinking Vraxians whispered that perhaps it was time they expanded their perspective, not just their territory. The cracks in their once monolithic arrogance might open a path to reform, or at least a grudging respect for those who fought in ways they had never understood before. And so, a new chapter began, one that future historians of the Concordat would record as the moment a single human, armed only with cunning and the memory of a friend's selfless sacrifice, toppled the myth of the Vraxians' unstoppable might. In countless starports, over countless transmissions, the story spread. Their greatest warrior was living legend, until he made the mistake of insulting a human's dead friend.